From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast.
The fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation.
I, Prophet of Esports, joined today by my friend and co-host William Collis.
Yeah, we got the book of esports out. It's a big deal.
So everyone knows me as the Prophet and William as the Professor.
They may call me the Prophet, but in my life outside of the business of esports, I have worked on the investment side of the table for the better part of the last 2 decades. The single fastest growing area of gaming and esports is gambling. It's booming right now. You don't need to be a prophet like me to see that. However, as an investor, I've stayed away from gambling and betting companies because of the reputational risk and often shady nature of the companies involved. This was true until now. I've recently bought stock in a new public company called Esports Entertainment Group, or EEG, which is focused on esports and gambling. The big difference that changed my mind is that EEG is a public company, NASDAQ listed, and fully regulated, focused on esports betting. The regulatory and audit requirements of a public company are key in my mind to provide the needed transparency for players, bettors, and investors. I had an opportunity to host the CEO of EEG on this podcast a couple of months ago, and I was very impressed by his vision for the company. We've stayed in touch, and I'm delighted to announce that they've accepted to become a sponsor of the podcast. If you're a family office, institutional investor, or investor of any kind, really, Esports Entertainment Group, ticker symbol GAMBLE, GMBL, might be one of the best ways to get exposure to the esports betting space and gaming in general. Make sure to check them out at esportsentertainmentgroup.com. Having said that, I need to make sure to state that this is only my opinion. I'm not an investment advisor or selling stock in the company. Please make sure you do your own research and seek advice from a licensed professional if you're looking to invest in the field. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast. I am Paul Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, William Collis. For those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for all the 5-star ratings and reviews. Thank you for all the love you give to the podcast. Thank you for buying William's book, The Book of Esports, on Amazon. I know people reach out to me telling me how much they love the first page of the book, and the rest sort of just goes downhill from there. But it's a it's such a tremendous book. I'm teasing, of course. Go buy it. It's on Amazon, The Book of Esports, and go buy some Business of Esports merch. You can get it from our website, thebusinessofesports.com. But most importantly, guys, if you're listening to the podcast, if you love this podcast, just tell your friends about it. That's the best way to grow it. William, how's it going?
It's going really well, Paul. It's been a busy couple of days, but I always look forward to these Wednesdays together. They're a blast.
They are a blast. I was actually...
We record on Wednesdays, I should clarify for the listeners. Yeah. You won't be getting this on Wednesday. This is like you're like traveling back in time. It's a reverse time vortex.
William, I had a question though before we jump into topics.
Anything.
Are you upset at the whole Anthem Next thing? Are you like were you counting on playing Anthem?
Well, it's actually kind of interesting because I'm one of the people who thought Anthem had a lot of potential.
Okay.
Like I actually like
when you played it, you liked it, or
not so much, but like the concept of like sort of sci-fi, fantasy, free flight, free roam, like there were a lot of good pieces, like kernels of pieces in that game. And I thought, I thought it was reflective when they announced Anthem Next that like they were going to, do their best to try to chip those pieces out and expand on them from, it's difficult to say Anthem was, I never played too much, but I don't know if it was a bad game. It just wasn't a great game. You know what I mean? Right. And I respected the decision to double down on a property that people thought clearly the developers had passions for and users seem to have passions for, because a lot of people stuck with Anthem. But clearly not enough people, because Anthem Next is, doesn't seem to be worth it now. But yeah.
So this is not really like a topic that we're covering this week, but I wanted to ask because, like, is this not the definition of sunk cost fallacy really here? Like, yes, you've invested millions and millions of dollars in this game, but no one liked it. Like, why keep dumping money into it? Why even attempt an Anthem Next in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, because like I don't. It is one of those things where, like, if the game hasn't performed to expectations, right, and it's performed in such a way that, like, you actually think it needs to be corrected, right? Like it's not like you can just patch it out. Like, it needs a total reboot. Yeah, why not put the money into a new game? Where, because you're essentially, that's what you're sort of saying. You're saying, I'm gonna have to make a new game. Or what puzzles me more is, why not make it Anthem 2? That's the thing that kind of loses it. Like, if you think there's something in Anthem, but Anthem 1 didn't work, sequel it. And if you're really worried about your existing fans, give free upgrades to people who bought it. Do something like that. But this whole idea of kind of patching in a new game to double, it's weird. And I almost wonder if it's more a marketing strategy, right? Like, rather than saying incremental patches to gradually improve the game, which doesn't sound exciting, it's like grand vision, 2 years, lots of incremental patches, look how different it will be. You know what I mean? But I do sort of agree that, like, it also didn't make sense to me with Final Fantasy when they did Realm Reborn, by the way. Like, that was the other big game that had the difference there, though. And what, I think people at Sony said was, like, they felt there was a reputational need to protect the property.
Well, I mean, that was kind of my like, sort of what I was thinking here, which is it like purely just a play for gamer, like, sympathy, right? Like, we're not bad, we're not so bad, guys, we're gonna fix it, we're good people, we care about this. Is it sort of like playing for gamer sympathy at that point?
I mean, it goes to show you, there's a quote, I think we've said this before on the podcast, but it's really true, is a late game won't stay late, but a bad game stays bad forever, right? And it's really true. It's this notion that, like, basically, when in doubt, publishers should delay, right? Because, like, at some point the game comes out, but if you launch a bad game, you can't take it back. You can't unfix it. And I think a really good example of that, by the way, is Cyberpunk, which, again, I'm not saying Cyberpunk was a bad game, but, like, it needed more time in development. I wonder if 6 more months, the narrative would be completely different around that game. It's tough to say. You don't know. You can't speculate, but it's definitely true that in today's world, when the cost of failure is so high, like, the need to launch with a product that you're very confident in is just astronomically more important. And I think that's why you see things like publishers like Activision Blizzard delaying their titles so much, right? Like, where's Diablo 4, right? Like, we've known about it for a while. Once upon a time, a publisher wouldn't announce a game and then be like, oh, coming 2, 3, 4. We don't know. You figure it out,
You figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, like, once upon a time that wouldn't have happened. But the reality is, the development cycles are so long. The affinity cycles take so long to build, and the risk of launching too early is so high. I do think it leads you to these weird situations. But yeah, the solution to kind of patch it's never struck me as the best option, right? It's never struck me as, like, it sort of feels like the solution you end up in when corporately you're not willing to commit to Anthem 2, but you're also not willing to back down from Anthem 1 because you're looking at a hole in the P&L,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Let's jump into some news, because there were some big stories this week.
A lot of big stories.
Let's talk about a company that like has the opposite problem, in the sense that they're really good, I feel, at launching games. Although there's not that much history behind it, because they've really only launched 2. But Riot was in the news this week with a bunch of stories, 3 stories, in fact. And let me just share all 3 here, so that
Let's do it, Paul. Share away.
So that you guys sort of see how these all tie in. We're going to talk about all of them together. So the first was a story talking about Riot pairing their first Valorant esports event with League of Legends tournament in Iceland in May. Okay, so they're basically in May, they're going to be holding a League of Legends tournament, and back to back, basically after the league tournament is over, they're going to be having a Valorant tournament at the same venue, basically, essentially at the same time, right?
Cool.
Like in series.
Mhm.
The second story is Riot starting to promote Valorant esports within Valorant the video game. So they've got these banners sort of in the landscape in the background promoting Valorant esports. And then the third article here was Verizon expanding their partnership with Riot. But the detail here, which is interesting to me at least, was Verizon is sponsoring both League and Valorant. So they're going across Riot properties here, and it's an all-encompassing kind of partnership. William, in general, the question I have for you is, this feels unique to me in the sense that I don't see Activision Blizzard doing stuff across Overwatch League and Call of Duty League or events back to back, or like, do you think this is brilliant, or are they mixing things up that shouldn't be mixed up? I'm curious how you
Well,
look at this.
Well, here's my thoughts, and I want to kind of like it's difficult to call this brilliant because like this is when I heard this story, like what I thought of was my background in the toy industry. In toys, there's a little thing that you do called the cross sell, where you put on that when anyone who's bought a toy knows on the back of the box, it shows you the toy that you're buying, and like two other toys you could also buy because hey, maybe you like this toy, so you should go and look at these other two toys that are somewhat related to the toy you're purchasing. And this is not a new idea. Like in almost any other industry, cross-selling is extraordinarily common because you already have a user who's interested in what you're offering. Why not offer them more, right? So to me, the fact that esports and gaming in general has not really cross-sold is unusual. It's extremely odd. And I think, candidly, a lot of the success that things like the Activision Blizzard launcher or the Steam launcher has had is effectively cross-selling, right? It's showing you the games that you like. It knows the games you like, and it shows you other games that you might like based on that. So if you take all of that, in a nutshell, wrap it up, put a bow on it, like, we don't think it's unusual for you to be promoted a game because you bought similar games. Why is it unusual for you to be promoted a tournament for a game you're playing? It's not. It makes perfect sense. I would like to know that tournament is coming out, and it doesn't look obtrusive to the gaming experience. I think take it a step further. I love the idea that you can combine a trip to see League with a trip to see Valorant. That's beautiful cross-selling for fans. And for management and planning, it's probably very synergistic, right? It's probably a lot cheaper to book a venue probably a lot cheaper per day to book a venue for 5 days than it is for 2 or 3, right? Like,
But you have to be set up for that from a management perspective, right?
Well,
to be able to do that well.
Yes, you do. You do. But that speaks to, I think, kind of the strength of Riot Games is this is a pretty obvious thing to do. I don't think it's brilliant. That doesn't mean it's easy to do. I think it's an obvious but difficult to do thing, which is why we have not seen many other publishers do it. The fact it's getting done, I think this is I guarantee you this is going to be successful. I have no doubt in my mind. And I'm talking about all of these things, like the in-game advertising of the tournaments, the back-to-back events, like all of that is going to work. It's just obvious. It's basic marketing. It will get traction. I think it is then going to drive a different class of how to describe this. I think it will then drive a different class of action across all publishers because they'll look at this and this will start to become the gold standard. Just like getting streamers to engage with your title at launch wasn't really the gold standard until it was. And now everyone's like, oh my gosh, endorsement marketing works, like, so I think this is it's actually a big step forward for the industry, but it's a very obvious step that I think has been waiting to be taken for a while now.
Yeah, you say obvious, right? Which I agree with you, but the reality is, like, I don't think anyone else has ever done this, right? Well, and you could argue there are most definitely other companies that could have done this. Like, why, if I want to go watch a Fortnite tournament, I can't remember the exact timing, but did Epic own Rocket League at the time of the Fortnite World Cup? I think they did, right?
I think they did. I don't remember. But like, you're saying why didn't hypothetically, for the sake of argument,
like, why not have an opening act, right? The same way a concert has an opening act, where the opening act is like some Rocket League tournament, and then the meat is the big Fortnite tournament.
But this happens. by the way. Like, just to point this out, like Activision Blizzard has been doing this for a long time. Like, Activision used to be at BlizzCon. They had all the championships for all the games back to back, right?
Okay, but they don't
So
do it today with their franchise league.
no, they don't. So I think the question that we have is, why does this feel different, right? Why did BlizzCon feel like too much noise, obscuring and not giving each individual title time to breathe, right? Whereas this feels like a smart decision. And I think the answer is because you have to look at where the titles are in their life cycle. Having StarCraft and World of Warcraft, World Championship finals back to back, which are late in life cycle games with devoted audiences, that's not necessary. The fans are already there. It's unlikely you're going to get new stuff. Like, you're telling me people at BlizzCon didn't know about StarCraft 2, like that was going to be, you're going to get a huge conversion rate, that was a big surprise. Like, the difference is Valorant is an earlier life cycle title, and they're now trying to drive interest in it from the league audience. And I guarantee, I don't think you're going to see this done consistently forever, just like you wouldn't see the World Series of baseball and the Super Bowl occur back to back, right? Even though there might be some costs and planning.
So they don't have the same owner, which is an issue.
Well, but leave that aside. Say they did. I think, marquee events stand alone. But I think what you're seeing here is this is in the phase of building, and this is a very effective strategy to build affinity. And over time, you'll see the properties divorce as they have more independent user bases, and there's less need to cross-sell because there's been enough discovery.
Yeah, I buy that, right? I buy that maybe over time they become more independent. I buy that it potentially helps create new fans for Valorant because you get sort of the spillover from League. The same way when a TV network launches a new show, they'll usually put it following, a very popular show, so that you get good ratings into the new show. The question is, though, does this speak, William, to potentially a view of how much overlap there is between fans? Like, in other words, does Activision Blizzard keep COD League and Overwatch League completely separate from an event standpoint, from an activation standpoint, because they believe deep down that the COD fan is not the Overwatch fan? And does Epic keep Rocket League and Fortnite separate because they believe the Rocket League fan is not the same as the Fortnite fan? And does Riot have some sort of deep-seated belief that the Valorant fan is the same as the League fan, and so we should leverage that by giving them more value, essentially?
Well, herein lies the rub, Paul, right?
Okay.
Which is, as clever as cross-selling is, you sort of hope it doesn't work, right? And let me unpack that point a little bit. You hope it doesn't work. Why? Because let's say it's a perfect cross-sell audience, that 100% of the people who play League are also going to play Valorant. Well,
Yep.
then, like, did you really make more money? Did you draw an incremental audience to
No,
your
but
game?
you provided more value for that fan.
But hold on, bear with me. Did you
Yep.
draw an incremental audience for the game, or did you cannibalize an existing audience playing one game and just convince them to swap to another game? Now, I'm exaggerating here, but like, a very real risk of launching similar products in similar categories is cannibalization, right? That's a known thing that happens. And yeah, I think the answer for probably, Riot is, like, in a perfect world, they are completely distinct user segments, that every single Valorant user is 100% incremental. They were dollars they were never getting before, and now it's totally new money into their ecosystem. The reality is, obviously, that's not the case. And I think what they're hoping for here is that what it is it gets League players who are heavy motivated League players to look at Valorant, right? It gives Valorant more exposure because it's leveled off the back of League. And I think the hope here is, primary and secondary games. Can you convince somebody whose primary game is a shooter to have a secondary game as a MOBA? And can you convince somebody whose primary game is a MOBA to have a secondary game as a shooter? So, we'll see what happens here. But again, I think that's always the risk, though, with these sort of similarly marketed events, is you accidentally cannibalize one product to build the other. So
But let me ask a question more directly, though, William, which is, say you're consulting to Activision Blizzard or
Yes.
to Epic.
Yep.
Okay. Given what we know and assume about the audiences for those companies' esports leagues, right?
Yep, I
or
love it. Yep.
properties,
Mhm.
would you advise either of those to essentially copy the Riot move here? In other words, would you tell Activision Blizzard, hey, the next big COD League tournament, you should do Overwatch League right before or right after? Or would you tell Epic, hey, the next time you do a big Fortnite event, you should do Rocket League before or after? Or do you think those are such different animals that it doesn't apply here?
I think, it's interesting, right? Like it's an interesting question. I think there's a lot of subtleties going on with Riot that make this more effective. Like the fact that Valorant and League, maybe could exist in some sort of IP temporal swirl together. Whereas I find Rocket League and Fortnite difficult to exist. Maybe they could. I mean, I don't know,
Really?
you could be creative about it. I don't know. I guess maybe I
Isn't
take
that
that back.
why Epic bought like
Yeah,
Rocket League
maybe I
again?
take
Because
that
it
back. I
fits
don't
with
know.
like their fan base, like
I
the younger, PG. I don't know.
Sure, sure. I guess the bottom line is like I strongly suspect that there were norms about cross marketing that were built on sort of gamers getting frustrated or feeling like their games were being overly commercialized. And those barriers are eroded now, and Riot showing us that. And you're going to see a lot more of this. And I would like to see it. I would like to see it used carefully, right? Like I would like to see, for example, Diablo 4 paired with a World of Warcraft event where there's real audience overlap and synergies and it's a new launch title. It's tougher for me to see Call of Duty paired with Overwatch, right? Because the reality is if you pair it together, it sort of is creating an impression that neither is strong enough to stand on its own, right?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
it's like essentially they're already at pains to make two shooters feel very different. If you put them on the exact same weekend, right? Like, you're really not serving your narrative and
Is
market. So
is the subtlety here that Riot? So because Riot's games could stand on their own, I think we both probably agree to that, right?
mhm.
I think both could stand on their own.
Yep, yeah.
Is the subtlety here that because they're different genres, there's less sort of fear of putting them back to back, right?
That's
If Riot had two shooters or two MOBAs, then maybe it's more difficult.
that's part of it, but there are also different points in their life cycle. I think that's really important. Like Valorant is at a stage in its life cycle where it is still it's been very successful. It's still trying to acquire new users. I don't think Riot has really said, okay, every Valorant user in the door, is in the door today, we can stop, right? League is probably at a point where they're more about marketing to lapsed players because everybody in the world who's ever wanted or had an interest in League has probably downloaded it and tried it at this point. You know what I mean? I don't think there's a pocket of 100 million gamers somewhere that's the great untapped well. I mean, I'm exaggerating here, right? Like to make a point. But the point I'm trying to make is you want to use mature products to accelerate the growth of earlier products. That's
Yep.
another reason why this pairing is so good, right?
William, let's talk about a connected story here. So we've been talking about Epic having Rocket League and Fortnite in their stable. Well, this was big news this week, where Fortnite. Hang on, let me make sure this is on screen here. Where this is an article from CNBC. Fortnite creator Epic Games buys the developer of Fall Guys, a title that defined the pandemic gaming boom. That was the headline from CNBC.com. And the key points here is Fortnite developer Epic Games has acquired Tonic Games Group, the British studio behind Fall Guys. Fall Guys became an instant hit when it launched last summer, attracting millions of players. The deal comes amid a slew of acquisitions in the gaming industry. So Epic is buying Fall Guys. Price has not been disclosed, so we don't know any of the financial terms of the deal. But in the context also of the last conversation, William, are you bullish on this? Because Fall Guys has esports potential. Fall Guys, fits the Epic Games PG family friendly seemingly direction that they want to go in. How do you feel about this move by Epic?
This is a tricky one for me because it all depends on the price, which is not disclosed, right?
Hold
You
on,
know,
can I just push back
yeah,
on that before you
yeah.
continue?
Okay, go for it.
I
Yep,
remember on a past podcast, I think it was when we were talking about the Bethesda acquisition, or maybe
yep.
I don't even remember. But I think the conclusion we came to was buying developers at this point at any price seems to be the right move. And I'm sort of I'm paraphrasing a little bit because we had longer conversations on this, right? But in the context of the growth of gaming in general, does it really matter what the price was here?
Well,
And I'm,
I
I'm there's,
I
I'm being a
take your
little
point.
facetious, right,
Yeah,
with my question.
I take the point here, but I think I was also the person who said on another podcast, like, because you were asking why don't these developers get scooped up, and I was saying because the reality is they've already made all the money from the initial sales of the game, right? And so at the point they're willing, it's like they're cashed up and they're ready to go. And the challenge that befalls those publishers is a much more difficult challenge. It's how do you convert a one-off hit into a sustained success, which is by no means a simple thing to do. And you're asking somebody to pay a premium for that risk at the very point when you're at the high water mark of your growth, right? So the answer is if this is, and let's be honest, Fall Guys is not in the zeitgeist like it used to be, right? Like that's
Correct. It has fallen off.
there's some benefit here. If this were Epic Games buying these guys at the peak when, there was this skin battle with all the streamers and everything, I think we'd feel differently about it. But so we have some hindsight here. But the reality is, if these guys are paying pricing as if Fall Guys is the number one trending term on Twitter, then I think this is a great deal for Mediatonic and a terrible deal for Epic Games because they overpaid for a property that's past it, right? And if they just waited a little bit for it to come down the curve, they could have got all that same IP at a much lower price, right? Flip it the other way. If this was Mediatonic recognizing, you know what, we don't know how to sustain this. We need the expertise of Epic. We're going to give you a good price for this because we recognize you can take our property to the next level. We're not going to be greedy. We've already made our money here. It's more about converting the brand into something with special. And then it's really great, right? But the reality is, I think this is an asset that belongs in the Epic Games portfolio. It feels like a natural fit. Let's be honest, right? It feels like a natural fit. Fall Guys, even though it's not Fortnite, it has so many Fortnite elements, cartoonish styles, silly action, crazy, frenetic multiplayer randomness, right? It just feels like something Epic should own. But the question becomes, so it's good that they acquired it from a strategy perspective and an abstract perspective. And I expect you're going to see them be able to do a lot with this property. But again, the question becomes, did you buy it at the peak? Right. We'll see.
I laughed when I saw this because I've been on this soapbox every time a breakout hit comes out, right? I feel like on the podcast, we talk about how, and I've said this so many times, right? The big publishers need to go scoop up these breakout hits every single time they happen, right? Now either someone at Epic was listening to the podcast, which I assume they are.
I assume they are.
and took my advice. But it's kind of funny, like we got what we wished for, but now is it a good thing, right? It's like it's unclear after you got what you wished for if it is actually what you wanted. And
well, it's because what you want is not an acquisition, Paul, right? What you want is not these developers buying a one-hit wonder. What you want is, and I think we would feel differently about this if the announcement was Epic Games acquires Fall Guys, envisions multi-year content strategy for casual esports, right?
yeah,
Like, then I think you'd be like, aha, I see. You didn't just buy a hot property because it was a fad. You didn't just buy a Beanie Baby, right? You had a vision for how those Beanie Babies turned into a Beanie Empire. It's a bad example because Beanie Babies bubble burst, but you know what I mean. Like,
but no, it's actually a pretty good analogy because I think what's causing me the discomfort, even though I feel like Epic took my advice here, right? They listened to the podcast, they listened to us, they acted on it, all feel good. William and I can pat ourselves on the back, but then it's like now you look at this acquisition and you go, wait a second, is this what we really meant, right? Like, because in my mind, I think part of it, the timing mattered, and you alluded to this a little bit, right? Which is these big publishers should have these corporate development teams that in the heat of the moment, in the heat of the excitement and hype at its peak, right? That they come in and they scoop these teams, which is hard, right? Because you have to pay a premium and maybe they're less willing to sell. The question is, in encouraging big publishers to go acquire breakout hits, have we encouraged them to just go and buy these companies after sort of all the hype has subsided, right? And then is that really the same effect anymore, right?
well,
Essentially,
and this was the risk of why people weren't buying them, because you're buying them at the peak of their popularity, so they're arguably overvalued, and you're
yeah.
buying them when you don't know what the other side looks like. It could be a cliff, right? So yeah, It's a tricky one, but I
Well,
you
they
know
all seem to fall off a cliff too, though, William, right? That's been, I think, the hallmark of these sort of breakout hits.
Yeah, and that's where I think a publisher like Epic can really help, right? Because the reality is if you're a small team working on developing you can get a great launch title. You can. You can get lucky, you can nail it, you can but it is very different to sustain games as a service today. It's very different. It's brutal. The pace of content we expect is just it's horrific, right? Like it's the reality is the big publishers today are not like they're almost machines for service. Like they are specialized in a way that the independents aren't. And if this strategy is bringing games as a service to Fall Guys, I like it a lot. If it's, oh shoot, Fall Guys looks like something that sort of fits with our brand, portfolio. We should probably buy it. Quick, buy it before somebody else does. I don't care about the price. We have to have it. Go, go, go. Right. Then it kind of looks reactionary and short sighted. And
Yeah.
I think Epic's smarter than this, though. I think we're going to see some interesting activations with Fall Guys coming, and I think it's going to very interestingly broaden their reach even younger. Like, I think the person I'd be worried
Yeah.
about with this, interestingly enough, is someone like Roblox, right?
For sure.
Like,
And I think Epic is worried about them, right? They're going
yeah,
to go public on March 10. Like
yep,
Epic, I don't think is ignoring that reality, right?
mm-mm,
Roblox is going to be in a great place financially. They've been growing. I think I saw an article saying like their revenue has doubled recently.
yep, yeah, yeah,
Like this is a company that could eat Epic's lunch if they're not careful.
mhm,
So I like this acquisition. I guess the question becomes, are we going to start seeing a string of these now? In other words, it's all like lagged by about a year, right? Where the big publishers wait a year for the user numbers to drop off and then go
yeah.
scoop them up. So in 3 months, we'll get the Among Us acquisition. Then 3 months later, we'll get the Phasmophobia acquisition. Then 4 months later, we'll see the Valheim acquisition, right? That's sort of in line with when they peaked.
But
Um,
I hope so. If it's really that delayed approach, if they're waiting for the publishers to cool up, they're recognizing the brand. Like imagine you saw an announcement for Fall Guys 2. That would get press. You would be excited.
yep.
Like, we'd talk about it on the podcast. We'd say, "Oh, that's interesting feature." Like it's like it shows you there's residual value that gets created in these brands that publishers like that's the big thing. Remember, every company becomes Disney. The publishers are more and more branding houses, right? They're the better places for brands to live like this in the long term, not an indie. Because by the way, the indie studio, do you really want to make Fall Guys 2? Do you really? I bet you don't. I bet you have another project you're dreaming of, Caterpillar Man, Woman, Dragon, right? Like whatever, I don't know. Like the greatest game ever. Like, like that's the reality. You want to make different I suspect they don't want to spend the rest of their life working for 10 years on Fall Guys, right? So more power to them. Convert it to a company that can do that and can honor the success you've had.
I will just add, William, just on the point where you said you think Epic's smarter than that in terms of this acquisition. I think there were clues in the Mediatonic announcement that shows Epic has a plan, right? Where they mention even specifically like we're gonna add functionality where squad versus squad modes and account systems and crossplay and right all these things that Epic can bring to the table. But then there was a question that it's a rhetorical question sort of that they posted in their announcement, which said free to play question mark, right? And the response that they gave was nothing to announce right now. And so, when you have the financial backing of an Epic going free to play, even if your user base is sort of on the decline, right? They can do that. They can take the
Does
loss.
a
They can
lot.
take the hit.
Does a lot. Yeah.
Does a lot, right? And could
Yep.
revive the brand big time, open it up to
Mhm.
an entirely new audience.
Particularly with a steady content drip and some attractive microtransactions,
That's it.
like you'd be right back. It's true. It's true. But that's what I mean, Paul. That's what a big publisher can do that the little publisher can't. Mediatonic never had the option of launching free to play. I bet they weren't capitalized in a way they could take that risk, right?
Yeah, right. And
Mhm,
they didn't launch that way, so they made some conscious decision, and I'm sure it was financially driven,
mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Especially when you're launching something unknown,
Yep,
right? A
that's right.
product
Yeah.
that has no track record.
That's right. Yeah.
Um, let's cover actually before we get to our last sort of set of stories here. I just want to say one quick word, guys, on Esports Entertainment Group. You guys know one of the fastest growing segments of gaming right now is esports betting. You guys know I've stayed away because of the reputational risk. The exception to this rule is a company called Esports Entertainment Group, ticker symbol GMBL. They're NASDAQ listed, completely regulated. They've got all kinds of tier 1 licenses for esports betting. This is one of the most exciting players in the esports space right now. If you're an investor, if you're looking to invest in the space, if you're, looking to put some money to work in the space, I highly recommend taking a look at esportsentertainmentgroup.com. Having said that, it's just my opinion. I'm not an investment advisor. I'm not selling stock in the company. Do your own research, seek advice from a licensed professional if you're looking to invest in the field. William, let's get to another trio of stories, which I like.
Let's
I kind of
do
like
it.
when
Let's do it.
3 Amazon related stories this week. Amazon/Twitch. Okay? The first is, I'll just read the headlines from TechCrunch. Amazon's GameOn app, a platform for sharing mobile gaming clips, launches on iOS. So they are launching this new app called GameOn. Okay. The second story is that Amazon's head of Fire TV and Luna Cloud Gaming has left for Unity, which is interesting. And the third is Twitch signs an interactive content deal with FIBA, which is the International Basketball Federation. And I want to break each one down individually. There are 3 Amazon Twitch stories. They're not as connected as the Riot ones. But first story here, William, on GameOn, this platform for sharing mobile gaming clips.
Tell me.
Anyone who uses Twitch knows like clipping gameplay is a big part of the platform. Clipping and sharing gameplay, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Twitch clips is a huge part. YouTube recently just knocked it off because YouTube gaming has no original ideas. And so why wouldn't Amazon launch this thing, which is focused on mobile gaming clips, right? And it's a mobile app. Why wouldn't they launch this under the Twitch brand? Why have a different brand for this?
Great question. That is like the silence was intentional. You
had me worried there for a second. The professor doesn't have an answer.
Well, the answer is I struggle because it feels like it's a mistake. Like, like it's just like like sometimes there's not a clever solution. This feels to me more corporately driven. Like this feels to me more like it was a separate group working on this, not Twitch, because it was for mobile. They didn't get access to the Twitch ban. They couldn't call it Twitch, right?
Is this the MSN esports hub effect? Like it's a different group somewhere in it. Like is Amazon having some Microsoft-itis here? Like where it's disparate teams working on things?
Or I would understand it if it was Twitch clips now rebranded to GameOn. Right. So GameOn becomes that, which I'm not saying it's a good idea, but like
that's not a good idea.
Well, but like if the idea that clipping is going to live in its own service vertical, but this just feels weird. It just feels like it feels to me like it lacks a bit of conviction. Like they want to see how it performs and they'll label Twitch back on it if it works, But it just, what would be the logic? What would be the reason you wouldn't want Twitch associated with your games content, like all games content?
It is. I don't have a good answer for you, William, other than maybe they think there's risk of trying new things like this and they don't want a public failure. Like I always wonder why an Amazon, for example, doesn't consolidate all of their gaming stuff under one brand that everyone can get behind, right? And if Twitch is that brand, for example, even here where we're talking about their cloud gaming service, the Luna, right?
Yep.
Like, why call that Luna? Why not call that Twitch streaming? Or like, why not consolidate all of, or Twitch, game cloud gaming or whatever, right? Like, why not consolidate all of your gaming stuff under one roof and extract all the sort of wonderful synergies from that, right? And build up that brand so that it's completely ubiquitous, very well known across the board, no confusion, right? If you're downloading this app, it's a Twitch product. If you're not a Twitch fan, it exposes you to Twitch. Like, I don't understand keeping these brands separate and distinct, other than the silos of groups inside the company and therefore unavoidable, or they think there's risk in the new stuff and they don't want any blowback on the stuff that's working.
Yeah, or they think that mobile is such a different audience, right? Like the mobile gamer is so different from the Twitch. But that, I don't know.
Like, I
Yeah,
think a majority of people watch Twitch on their phone at this
no.
point.
It's mobile gaming though. Like maybe they
Yeah, I
watch Twitch
know.
on. I know. I think a majority do too. By the way, but it's like it's mobile gaming. Yeah. I don't know, Paul. This
It's
is when
weird. No, it's weird.
I struggle with it massively, like
Yeah.
massively, right? Because I just, yeah, I wish I could say I had the answer, and I wish I could say like there was a stroke of, and maybe there is, like maybe Amazon wants to launch a broader game on service as a games distribution platform, and they don't want Twitch to be, because like Game On is a very generic name. You know what I mean? Like, it's not
Yeah.
like Game Clips or something. Game On feels expansive. Like, maybe Amazon feels they need a second gaming brand to stand for just but I mean, come on, like you can see I'm grasping at straws here, right? The reality is I think they had a mobile clipping project and it was done by a separate unit, so it had a separate name, you know? And that's a bit sad, but I think it's probably where we are.
It's even kind of weird in the context, I think, of recent efforts where they've moved like more branding to Twitch. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I actually haven't followed it that closely, but didn't Amazon Prime Gaming, like, didn't they change that to Twitch Prime Gaming or something like that? Like they've made an effort to make Twitch more the center of their gaming brand.
Yeah, they've done some brand consolidation stuff, but it took a long time, right? It took a
Yeah,
long time to do that. And I mean, the other answer could be your Amazon. The risk of it not working and being folded into the brand is high. So who cares if you have to do a rebrand and it costs you $22 million 3 years from now? Like, who cares? Right. Just like launch the
true.
service, prove that the service, I mean, maybe they're listening to our podcast and Amazon laughing at us and they're saying, come on, guys, that's not how it works. You know, the marquee brands come out for the successful products. This is an experiment, right? Like, we hope it works. We think it's great. However, we're not going to just go, it would be like if every, movie Disney, I would be like, I don't think of a Disney example here. I can't come up with them, but it'd be like, yeah, I mean, it could just be a simple preservation. You silo things you experiment with, and they could just say it's an experiment. Like, what? You want all the alphabet companies to be called Google something? Come on. Like,
I mean, I think they kind of do that.
well, they kind of do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay, let's talk about the second one here, which was actually the third one that I mentioned, but I think it's the most logical in order here, which is
Mhm.
Twitch signing interactive content deal with FIBA. This to me would be a non-story, William. Like,
Mhm.
like honestly, I would have on any given week, I would have completely ignored this. I don't
But
think it's really interesting business news. But right
Mhm.
in the context of our discussion on streaming wars, how streaming platforms are positioning themselves against each other, the Chinese potentially coming into the US, all these kinds of swirling discussions around one streaming platform versus another, right?
Mm-mm-mm.
Twitch, in my mind, became big on the back of gaming. I think they've become bigger on the back of things like just chatting, right? That
Yep.
are definitely not gaming.
For sure. Mhm.
This to me is a clear departure, right? Like, yes, they do some NFL games, but here now we're moving not even into, and no offense to the International Basketball Federation, but it's not the NFL, right? Is this too like outside of Twitch's sort of reason for being that it sort of starts to feel like a mistake? Like, do we really care to have tier 3 sports, not even esports, on a platform like Twitch?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I let me make the counter argument here, right? Which is, look, like, what's the cost to Twitch of putting up another channel, right? Like, the beauty of the self-navigated, self-selecting world that we're in is like it's the same reason Twitch can afford to have a million streamers, but there are only like 500 that are super, like the reality is like the cost of putting up a new channel and getting the broadcast content out there is relatively cheap. It's not like in terrestrial TV where like you have 900 channels, that's it, that's all you can get, and only like 50 of them are the good ones. You know what I mean? Like, you're in a world where the navigation sort of solves a lot of the clutter problems. That's one. And then two is like, don't these guys want, I mean, we've seen this again and again, that they sort of want to be more than games. That for them to have, like, if all the Twitch brand ever is live streaming games, Amazon won't be happy with it. That's why just chatting is happening. That's why they're doing all these other content plays, right? Like they're trying to get Twitch, and maybe they'll succeed, maybe they won't, but like doesn't like looking at live sports make sense? Because Twitch is fundamentally they have to do live broadcast things. They have to do live broadcast
So,
things, right? So why not go with classic hallmark of live broadcast? You know,
so
I think it's worth it.
let me just connect the last conversation with this one then, which
Yep.
is this a signal then that potentially Amazon doesn't see Twitch as their gaming brand,
Well,
right? And therefore Game On makes sense in that context. We're not going to consolidate all our gaming stuff under Twitch if Twitch is not our gaming brand.
that very well could be the case, right? If Amazon now views Twitch as their 10-year plan says Twitch is the home for digital live broadcasting, right? And in that case, associating that brand, if that's where you want it to be, with mobile games clipping, that's dead weight. You're holding back your aspirations. Now, I don't know. I think maybe I'm wrong here, but I think the reality of Twitch and, you know, what it has potential to be is it needs way more integration with other Amazon platforms to achieve that vision that we just described, right? Like way more integration because the reality is the people who watch Twitch today are gamers. Unless you're injecting non-gamer audiences into it, you're never going to grow it beyond gaming. And I haven't seen Amazon taking the steps to actively push their massive non-gamer funnel, right? They're mad because they basically have like all e-commerce, like anyone who's ever made an e-commerce purchase probably has an Amazon account, even if it's not Prime, right? They have a massive non-gamer funnel they can dump. I haven't seen them make strong attempts. I've seen them try to link Amazon into Twitch. I haven't seen them try to link Twitch into Amazon, which is why I'm not convinced like I'm not convinced they're really gunning for that vision the same way they might want it. They might hope they get there. I think the vision today, my speculation is more like, let's find incremental pockets of content that can work to broaden this beyond something, right? You know what I mean? But I hope we'll see. I hope they have the broader piece, you know?
I've been very bullish on Twitch, right? They're they're the
course you
leader in
have.
the streaming space.
Mhm.
I think after seeing these three stories, though, William, I genuinely believe that at the very top, I don't think they understand how to win in gaming. I think for every FIBA deal that they do, they're ignoring a deal with a gaming or esports property, like a media rights deal or something that
That's not true. I disagree
I
with
think
that.
this leaves their shift to more mainstream sports and just chatting style content.
Mhm.
I'm not saying is bad for Twitch. What I'm saying is it leaves them vulnerable to an attack by a more pure play player, right? Like someone
Well,
who comes in that says, "We're the destination for gaming. You want gaming, it's here. You want all the noise, you want to go see international basketball, like yeah, you can go to
yeah,
Twitch."
you want
But like
the authentic content, come here, yeah. Well, we've been saying it for a while, like, we're gonna be right sometime that there's gonna be a proper streaming war coming, right? Because the reality is you can't continue to scale and go pan product, right? And not be more vulnerable to niche disruptive competitors, right? That's just the reality. That's how business cycles work. And I agree. I mean, and we've said before, there's lots of competitors who could do it. All the Chinese streaming platforms. I'm very bullish on a successful entry into the States. So, we'll see. But yeah, I agree. But also the flip side is like, from Twitch's perspective, why do you not sprawl now? Right? Like they can get the content. Why not? Why not see how it works? I doubt they're hurting for money. You know what I mean? And don't you want to play and experiment with new content types and see what works and learn? Like, I would feel the opposite. If Twitch was just sitting on itself, being only gaming with no attempt to grow, I would say that lacks imagination. That's like Skype 10 years ago, thinking it's just a phone replacement business.
that's fine, William, but then show me that you have a strategy around winning in gaming, right? Because I think the more you go broad with Twitch, the more you lose that brand that's today very much specific to the gaming audience, or at least quite specific to the gaming audience. And you don't have anything else. Maybe Game On is the answer. Like, I don't know. Maybe they're already thinking about this, but fundamentally, I think they risk losing the gaming dominance that they have by going wide. I have no issue with them going wide, but at least have a plan for the other stuff, right? A new platform, a new brand.
Yeah, launch it as sports on, right? Like the adjacent,
Something,
like,
right? Like,
yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
and then that third story, this one, Amazon's head of Fire TV and Luna Cloud Gaming leaving for Unity. Like when I see that, I go, okay, maybe I think my hypothesis is correct here. At the top, these guys don't really have a plan for gaming. And when you have, someone who's heading up one of their definitely most hyped initiatives, this Luna Cloud Gaming stuff, right? Taking off and leaving for Unity to and the job he's going to at Unity is they're heading up their Unity Create business. Like this is
Cool.
This to me is like maybe they don't really understand. Maybe they don't have a strategy and people are leaving as a consequence, right? Typically, when a top executive like this, that's again managing a very splashy, high profile Amazon project like Luna and goes to Unity, I go, wait a second, maybe something's not right at Amazon.
Well, that is a concern, right? Because Luna is a big ship, right? Typically, a big ship that's getting close to the destination, you want to stay right where you are, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest, right? It's
Take
not
all
like
the credit, the accolades, right? It's this
like,
huge success.
if you made, hypothetically speaking, if you made The Matrix and you had seen the rough cut and then the near final and you knew the release date was there, would you really leave who made The Matrix, Warner Brothers? Would you really
Warner
jump
Brothers.
from Warner Brothers? No, you'd be like, you know what? I'm going to stick here for 3 months. I think it's going to work out, right?
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, it is. It's a point of concern. You could also look at it the other way and say, look at maybe it's not Amazon being weak, maybe it's Unity being strong, right?
And Unity is strong, no question.
Yeah.
Right.
And what you can offer somebody like this, right? But yeah, I agree. You don't want your head leaving. Like, you just don't.
Weird. And like, I don't know if the industry, frankly, the cloud gaming space can survive another major failure, to be very honest.
Not
Right?
if Google and Amazon take a crack and it doesn't hit. Not if
right? At this point, it's like, I think you call it at that point and you go, this is maybe in 10, 20 years, but at this point, if they haven't figured it out, if Google and Amazon can't figure it out, well, probably no one can at this point.
That's exactly right. You would look at it and you would say, okay, guys, like, Microsoft, do you really want to swing at this? Apple, do you really want to swing at this? Like, you're welcome to, but yeah, I think reasonable minds would conclude. Now, you could also argue it the other way, which is maybe Luna's business model looked a lot like Stadia's, right? And now they've seen what happened with Stadia, and the guy's thinking, I really thought we called it. I was worried we were going to be late to market. Maybe we got lucky. We got a canary in the coal mine scenario, but yeah, it's not, but again, always speculating on personnel, right? Like, there could be so many other things when it's one person leaving, right? There could be so many other.
No question.
The guy's family lives somewhere else and he wants to go near, you just don't know, right? But I think it's safe to say across the 3 Amazon announcements, what the strategy isn't clear. Right.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's at least safe to say that. That doesn't mean we're not saying there is a strategy. Amazon is the smartest company ever. Like, I've learned my lesson. Don't bet against them. But it is tough to say that in this case, the strategy is not readily apparent to observers. Right.
I will just reinforce the position I've always taken is I never bet against Bezos. Right. I think he's the smartest guy probably on the planet right now. Right. The reality is, though, he's not full time at Amazon anymore. He's gone now. And so all of this news starts to, like, again, the pieces start to feel like they're fitting together. And you're going, wait a second. The big brain at the top is gone, right? The heart and soul is gone. This feels like a mixed, confused strategy. You have one other talent that leaves. Like, maybe they don't really know what they're doing on the gaming front.
2 months, Paul. You can't be saying this doesn't have the mark of Bezos on it. 2 months after
like Apple after Steve Jobs, yes, has been profitable, but I don't know. Have they done anything groundbreaking? Not really. So I don't know.
The iPhone 11 was groundbreaking, Paul. You think it's a big step forward from the iPhone 10, AirPods.
AirPods.
I take your point, though, that but also, like, again, there's innovative leaders who catalyze change, and then there's growth leaders and that's why Apple's done so well, Paul, because they've grown. They haven't needed to reinvent the wheel.
Tim's the quintessential bean counter, right? Bean counter style leader.
did a legendary job of just I mean, I'm this is really understating what is an incredibly prestigious and difficult to do job, but just a really good job of you have the blueprint for the house, lay the bricks. You know what I mean? It's harder to do. That focus in companies is hard. People like I promise you, like it always impresses me when companies are able to do that because you're telling me they don't have a million trillion great ideas flowing through there. Picking not to do them and still generating profitable shareholder returns is a type of strategic strength.
I think my business takeaway here, William, is that there are always signs, right? There are always signs.
Yeah.
And if you're sort of observant enough, you can see them and draw some conclusions that maybe not 100% of the time, but 80% of the time are going to be pretty spot on,
Mm,
right?
mm.
And I feel like we're starting to see signs here at Amazon and Twitch that shows confusion or at least lack of a clear path or lack of a clear strategy or vision. And it's starting to feel a little jumbled. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing more negative news coming out of that camp.
I think particularly given what happened with Crucible, it's fair to say that we can leave a question mark on this. You know, like
Yeah.
we're gonna yeah.
Fine. More
Right. Yeah.
diplomatic way of saying it.
Mhm. Yeah.
William, thank you as always. This wraps up this week's podcast. Guys, just a quick reminder, make sure to go follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok. It's all the same at Busy Sports. William does really cool dances every single day on TikTok. So you don't want to miss that.
I'm a
And
legend.
and then go buy the book of esports on Amazon. Don't forget to do that. And most important of all, guys, please tell your friends about the podcast. Leave that 5-star rating and review. It helps other people to find the podcast. We really appreciate it. And we will see you guys next week.